My name is Ophelia Hallsteinberg, and this is the first of an undecided number of videos within which I will keep a record of my life here in Elsinore for posterity. A living history project. The recordings will... I am keeping this video diary as a member of the Royal Court to provide a record of this moment in time that will serve as a primary source document in Elsinore's history. Or I'm keeping this diary out of desperation, because I am lonely. I have no one to talk to, and my days have started to bleed together indistinguishably. Either way, my name is Ophelia. I am the sole sister of Laertes Hallsteinberg and daughter of Sophia Bernstoff, deceased, and Polonius Hallsteinberg, war hero, director of intelligence, and advisor to King Hamlet of Denmark. So, what makes anything I have to say of any consequence? Well, as a resident of Elsinore Castle, I am a member of the Danish Royal Court. And I have a secret. For the past 2 years, I have been in a romantic relationship with Prince Hamlet, son of King Hamlet and Queen Gertrude and sole heir to the Danish throne. That felt good. I've never said that out loud before, I don't think. So, how am I involved with the prince? And no one knows it. Well, Prince Hamlet and I have known each other all of our lives, but a couple of years ago, something changed, and we became more than just friends. When we were young, we would all play together. Laertes was the boss and the rest of us were his followers. But then at a certain age, I was told that it wasn't proper for me to be friends with boys, so I had to stop playing with Ham and the others. I still had Laertes, but a long time passed before I got to know Ham again. Well, the summer after he finished his degree, our paths began to cross more and more frequently. The summer season is the busiest time in the royal calendar. Garden parties, state dinners, croquet games, polo matches, garden shows, and the royal regatta. And for the first time in years, Hamlet was attending them all, now minus his usual male entourage. And we found ourselves rekindling our friendship. About a month into the season, the travelling players arrived in Elsinore to present a marathon performance of Greek tragedy in the castle's open-air auditorium. Well, a seated affair, Hamlet and I found ourselves sitting together for the entire day. I'm not fond of Greek tragedy. There are less than a handful of plays that appeal to me, but Hamlet was in his element. At some point in the afternoon, I'm not sure when, I stopped looking at the stage and, finding it more entertaining, watched him watch the plays instead. Despite knowing the text so well that he was mouthing the words, he still seemed surprised and moved by their performances. I swear I saw tears in his eyes when Priam was murdered, so engrossed and invested he was in the play. At the end of the performances, when my head was melting from boredom mixed with concentration, Hamlet turned and asked me for my thoughts on the plays. Well, I said they were well played, or something like that. The kind of thing you say when you didn't really like something, but you don't want to be rude. But Hamlet wasn't satisfied, and he began questioning me on my feelings regarding every aspect of each play. In the end, I had to tell him I didn't really have any strong feelings, as I didn't really like classical theatre. He was shocked. It was as if I had slapped him across the face, no worse. It was like I had slapped his mother across the face in front of him. "How is that possible?" he spluttered. "How can anyone be ambivalent towards the trials of humanity we have just witnessed?" Well, I said I appreciated that the acting was good, and I had been moved by Hecuba on the death of her husband, a detail, though somewhat true, I included because I knew it was the scene that had affected him the most, earning me an appreciative nod. But then something inside me made me continue. "To be honest," I blurted out, "I have little fondness for them. I find neither enjoyment nor catharsis in their morose deluge of violence and suffering. I said all the women are either victims or villains. There is no in-between. And if they're not committing gruesome murders, they're being murdered or being forced into taking their own lives." I may have said more than that. I'm not sure. But at some stage, Hamlet's aghast expression made me stop, at which point I began to panic. What if I had offended him beyond repair, I thought desperately. Well, disagreeing with a royal is not a wise life decision. But then he burst out laughing. Roaring, uncontrolled laughter that made his whole body shake while he slapped his leg with his palm. My confused expression, I later learned, serving only to make him laugh harder. That was the start of it. That moment. Our first kiss would not be for another few weeks, but that was the start of our romance. For the rest of the summer, we both attended every social occasion and spent them all together. Talking, laughing, people watching. He liked that I didn't just say what I thought he wanted to hear, and I liked that he cared what I had to say. Laertes had just moved to France, so at that time Hamlet was the only person I could talk to, knowing that everything I said wouldn't immediately be reported back to Polonius. That was 2 years ago. "And why, Ophelia, have you chosen to keep this relationship a secret?" "Well, because once it is known, it won't be ours anymore. It will be the whole kingdom's royal romance. Now, when we do come clean, it will be to announce our engagement. As Denmark's golden boy, Hamlet's life is for all intents and purposes an open book. Quite literally. There are 3 biographies published already, and he's only just 30. They're all unofficially produced, of course. It'd be far too vulgar for the royal family to have one commissioned. And in reality, one of them is just a glorified picture book. Sometimes I imagine being interviewed about them in the future. His biographies? No, I've never read any of them. To be honest, I was too busy reading his love letters to me to read anything else. Whole chapters speculating on his love life, really? And I barely featured. Ha! I had no idea. The Wittenberg tabloid articles. Yes, I did see them. They were plastered on every magazine. But, well, it just goes to show. You can't believe everything you read. Because, as you now know, we were already a couple at that point. All my imaginary interviews are quite combative. When we do come clean, the media frenzy will come hard and fast. He's the people's prince, which means they think they own him, and he feels answerable to them. In fairness, someday he will be responsible for an entire kingdom. For the moment, though, he is in university in Wittenberg, doing a PhD in classical studies, which I convinced him to pursue, and I'm here, on my own, happy that at least one of us is doing something that we love. No, he hates being away from me, but it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. He suggested I go with him, of course, but obviously that was never going to happen. However controlled Hamlet's life is, mine is even more so. Not because of responsibility, but propriety. A daughter is basically a liability until she marries, so is best kept close at hand. Close at hand or locked up far away. What's that song? There was a little maiden, no. There was a lovely maiden, there was a lovely maiden, long, long ago. They locked her in a tower, they locked her in a tower, long, long ago. The trees grew all around her, long, long ago. It's a nursery rhyme you learn as a child. One of the ones where you all hold hands and dance in a circle. That bit used to scare me. But there's a happy ending. The prince comes and rescues her and they get married. When Ham's finished his PhD in Wittenberg, he will return to Elsinore and announce our love and imminent wedding. Well, he'll propose, I'll say yes, and then we will announce our love and wedding. Engagement and marriage within a year. That's how royalty does love. Though that's a year away in itself at least. For the moment, we make do with sending letters or seeing each other once or twice a year when he visits. Oh, there is somebody who knows about us actually. Horatio. I don't know what we'd do without him. He's our kind of go-between. I pass messages to him and he sends them to Ham in Wittenberg. And Ham sends his letters to me, to Horatio first too. He even runs interference with the press while Ham's here in Elsinore, while we swap coded notes and meet in secret. It's quite romantic and fun, really. Sometimes we write coded messages, but mainly we leave flowers or plants or drawings if the flowers we need aren't in season. Secret messages through flowers. It all sounds very implausible. Well, most people don't know this now, but in olden days, every flower was widely known to have a symbolic meaning or purpose. There's a whole realm of folklore just for flora. There are stacks of books in it in the castle library. Ham and I both got a couple when we got together and started leaving messages for each other through flowers, leaving them outside each other's quarters or exchanging them through Horatio. We know lots off by heart now. The ones we use regularly. Carnation for pure love and admiration. Hydrangea, devotion. Motherwort, concealed love. And pink roses for romantic love. That's the perfect bouquet. Roses are fun as every colour signals a different meaning. Oh, and putting any flower upside down inverts the meaning. My favourite is chickweed, as that signals a rendezvous. That song is stuck in my head now. A handsome prince came riding by, riding by, riding by. A handsome prince came riding by, long, long ago. He cut the trees down one by one, one by one, one by one. He cut the trees down one by one, long, long ago. He kissed her in the tower, long, long ago. There was a happy wedding, wedding, wedding. There was a happy wedding, long, long ago. There. A happy ending. Though it doesn't say how long she was in the tower before he came for her. Well, anyway, That's all there is to say for the moment. Probably nothing I say from now on will be half as interesting. But you? For posterity, it has been 1 week since my last entry. Hamlet is all over the news cycle this week. The sole topic of these news stories being how much the Prince Hamlet is enjoying his free time in Wittenberg. Today brings pictures of him with groups of scantily clad women, one of whom has her hand placed proprietarily on his arm. A Countess Veronique, apparently. And how did these articles make you feel, Ophelia? The man you love, cavorting with what could be described as trashy sluts, actively trying to seduce him. Oh, water off a duck's back, Trisha. I felt very safe and secure in our relationship. Also, I was very busy myself in Elsinore while Hamlet was away. Very busy. Reading. Sewing. Etc. Hamlet keeps telling me to stop reading the tabloids. Easy for him to say, since I'm not splashed across their front pages hanging around with half-naked men, if you ask me. Laertes thinks the tabloid articles are strategic, purposely planted to distract the public from undesirable political occurrences. He's such a nerd. But his theory does make sense. For months now, the news has revolved around one topic: the possible threat posed by Fortinbras, nephew of the King of Norway. Fortinbras is the now matured son of old Fortinbras, who invaded Denmark and defeated King Hamlet in the Great War. There have been rumours circulating for months that he, now of age, is planning to seek revenge for the death of his father. Every day brings a droning commentary, detailing his movements and speculating his intentions. It's mind-numbing. Recently, I heard Polonius say that he had begun to raise an army, so maybe it's no coincidence that we now have a full week of Hamlet in Wittenberg articles. Personally, I think King Hamlet and Fortinbras should just measure their dicks and be done with it. Just saying. For posterity, it has been 3 days since my last entry. There is nothing to report today, except that I'm sick of staring at these 4 walls. Sick of being stuck in time. Eat, read, sleep, repeat. Wish I could go somewhere. Do something. It is 2 more hours till dinner, and then another 3 before I can go to bed. I think I'll write to Laertes, though obviously I have no news to share. I could tell him about Ham's supposed exploits in Wittenberg, though I'm sure he's read them for himself. The articles this week got me thinking about the Great War. Well, they got me thinking about Laertes' theory, which got me thinking about Fortinbras, which got me thinking about the Great War. I find the idea that we could be heading for a war now because of the outcome of a war that ended 30 years ago baffling, so I wanted to know how the Great War started in the first place. Considering how much literature there is on war, it was surprisingly difficult. Almost everything written is about King Hamlet's victorious overthrowing of old Fortinbras. No focus on how it started, but from the bits I did find, it seems that old Fortinbras was betrothed, or was meant to be betrothed, to Queen Gertrude, Ham's mom, when she was still a princess. But something happened that she married King Hamlet instead, and eventually it led to war. Men. Till next time, adieu. I just received a letter from Hamlet. No mention of the stories of him with the trashy-looking women. He is spending all of his time studying, he says, though not all of his time, evidently. He says he misses me, and he loves me, and he relishes reading my letters. I sent about 3 for every one of his, and he enclosed a poem. Neither of us ever has that much to tell the other, so we send each other poems, extracts from stories or pictures. His are all classical. This one, he says, is by the Greek poet Sappho. I love the sensual. For me, this, and love for the sun, has its share in brilliance and beauty. I desire, and I crave. You set me on fire. Suck on that, Countess Veronique. I watched back over the recordings I've made so far, and I feel I should say that I'm not really annoyed about the Wittenberg stories, or the biographies, or the coverage of Hamlet in general. It comes with the territory. I knew what I was buying into. It's not as if it's completely new to me. My family are often featured in the media too because of Polonius. As the king's chief advisor, he is part of the king's inner circle, so he is of public interest. And it doesn't hurt that he's an enigmatic war hero and handsome widower. His social status trickles down to me and Laertes. Mainly Laertes. The stories about me are largely focused on my appearance and what I'm wearing. I'm of casual interest, but not exciting. Polonius's chaste daughter, his little Princess Ophelia, newsworthy only because there's no actual princess to write about. Laertes, on the other hand, is really popular. Last year, he got the popular vote for Denmark's second most eligible bachelor, coming in between Ham and Ham's uncle Claudius. Laertes doesn't really like the media attention, though. That's partly why he moved to France, I think. We all know that the media's positive attention is liable to turn at any minute, so it's safer to just stay away from the limelight. Safer to just stay in my room, reading and sewing, than risk inspiring the wrong kind of story. A photographer got a picture of me crying once, and I was woeful Ophelia for a year. As Polonius reminds me constantly, too much attention, and I could very quickly go from being precious and chaste to corruptive and lewd or wanton and slutty. So it's better to stay out of sight, Ophelia. For the moment, at least. They're gonna get some shock. Queen Gertrude came to see me today. She brought flowers and stayed for a short while. When she left, she gave me a hug. After a second or two, I went to pull away, but she held on to me. After a few more seconds, I let my weight rest upon her and held her tightly back for I don't know how long. When she left, I burst into tears. I felt so grateful to her and so guilty for what Ham and I are hiding from her. I know she'll be happy for us when we tell her, but I also know how hurt she'll be that we didn't tell her sooner. Today should be my mother's birthday. I only know that because of Gertrude. I knew nothing about her growing up. Polonius never talked about her, and there was nothing in our chambers to say she ever existed. Gertrude told me when my mother's birthday was when I was 10 and gave me a photograph of her. She, I learned, had been my mother Sophia's best friend. It was the first time I had seen my mother's face. I'm sure I saw it as a baby, but I don't remember it. She died before I was 1. I figured that out from her tombstone. Gertrude waited till I was 10 to give me the picture because she said I was old enough not to show it to Polonius or to tell him that I had it. He finds thinking about her too upsetting. I imagine he sees her face every time he looks at you, she said with a pained look on her face. Her words lodged in my brain. Since then, I've often wondered if I didn't look like her, would Polonius love me the way he loves Laertes? Laertes was 5 when our mother died, so he has some memories of her. I was red with jealousy over this as a child and used to ask him to repeat the memories he did have of her over and over, desperate to hear them. Bless him, he'd tell me every time. He remembered that she used to kiss him on the forehead every night before he went to sleep. This made me so happy because I thought I could remember her doing the same to me. I still think I remember it. But it may not be memory at all, but something I imagined because of Laertes' story. I don't remember a time when I didn't remember it. Sometimes, even now, when I'm lying in bed at night, in between being asleep and awake, I can feel the weight of her lips against my skin. And sometimes it will jolt me awake, and I'll open my eyes expecting there to be someone standing over me. But of course there's never anyone there. As I got older, Gertrude began telling me stories about my mother that I wish she'd told me sooner. I think about my mother every now and then. She'll pop into my head randomly. But on her birthday, today, I fill my head with thoughts of her. I try and remember everything Laertes and Gertrude has ever told me. And then I listen to melancholy music and sink into the sad feeling that comes with never having known her. That's me today. I can't believe I'm saying this, but the king is dead. It happened late last night. He was alone in his study, and when the maid entered to tend to the fire, he was slumped over his desk. Dead. The whole castle is in shock. Apparently the royal physicians are still with him. They say there's no word on what, killed him. He was a big, strong man. No more than 60. He indulged in rich food and drink like my own father and every male member of the court, but I've never heard of him being sick. Never. The atmosphere in the castle is thick with uncertainty. Polonius is all action, rushing around from place to place, but everyone else is just wandering around, completely overwhelmed by the news. Everyone is wondering what will happen next, but are afraid to ask in case they appear inappropriate or that they should already know. I learned what happened this morning when I got up, but I think most of the castle has been awake all night. Ham has been sent for, and the Laertes. Ham will arrive tomorrow night at the earliest. Poor Ham. I do not know how he is going to take this. His father was well respected. I heard Polonius saying they are expecting hundreds of foreign dignitaries to arrive in Elsinore over the next 2 days. I don't know whether to try and get a message to Ham through Horatio or to wait till I can see him in person. He'll go straight to the royal quarters when he arrives, so there probably isn't any point in getting a message to Horatio. Queen Gertrude has not left the royal quarters. I wonder how she's feeling. This is also surreal. I feel uneasy in my bones. And it's terrible. But the first thought I had when I heard the news is that Hamlet would have to come home. I feel so guilty. Poor Ham. Today is the first day of the King's wake, and I'm exhausted. I do not know how Hamlet must be feeling. He has not slept since he arrived. I made my way to the chapel where the King is laid out first thing this morning, and he was there with Gertrude. I just hugged him before sitting beside him in silence. Then other members of the court began to enter, starting with Horatio. People came and went throughout the day, myself, Ham, Gertrude and Horatio the only constants. Claudius, the king's brother, came and went with Polonius several times. Queen Gertrude is now head of state, but I think my father and Claudius are managing everything and organising the funeral. Polonius is full of self-importance. I'm not sure what has to be done officially on the death of a king, but a lot, seemingly. Ham remained still for most of the day. Old Hamlet wasn't one for emotion, so he would probably appreciate the stoicism. I got to talk to Ham for a few minutes before I left. He just kept saying he should have been there. It broke my heart. And I was reminded how strongly I'd encouraged him to go to Wittenberg. The funeral is set for the day after tomorrow. We will go straight from the castle to the cathedral, and then back here to bury or place the king in the royal mausoleum. I've never been to a funeral before. My head keeps whirring with inane thoughts, and I can't stop thinking that I don't know what to wear for the funeral. I don't want to ask someone, but I don't want to wear the wrong thing and look like I'm trying to garner attention. I presume I wear black. A black skirt or dress, but should it be floor length? Should I have a hat or a veil or something? I don't know if I have appropriate shoes. Would high heels look like I was dressing up? Like I was going to a party. I have a black gown, but it's sparkly. I've seen Polonius leave to go to hundreds of funerals representing the king or honouring fellow soldiers, but he just wears his old dress uniform. Laertes is due to arrive tomorrow. Hopefully he'll know. Today was the king's funeral. It was monstrous. Thousands of bodies lined the streets as we made our way from the castle to the cathedral. I sat behind Hamlet in the church beside Laertes. The mass was long and solemn. Looking at the casket and the priest, I found myself thinking about my mother's funeral and what it was like. Imagining it was her in the coffin and not the king. Had many people attended. We sat beside Polonius in the front pew. Were Laertes and I there, or were we left at home? Or was Laertes there without me? Was any music played? Were there many flowers? She loved flowers. Then I started to imagine all the occasions held there that she had missed and would miss. Where the coffin stood is where Hamlet and I will stand when we marry, and she won't be there to see it. Tears started rolling down my cheeks and had landed on my hand before I realised I was crying. Laertes reached over, a look of surprise on his face. I wanted to explain, to say I was not crying for the king. But I couldn't. So instead, I just smiled weakly and took his hand. I felt like the worst kind of imposter. I love Hamlet. I love him with all my heart. And he can never, ever know. But the truth is, I'm not sad that the king is dead. When I learned the news and I heard the other female members of the court wailing in the corridors, I felt nothing. He was a horrible man. A cruel, hard, nasty, misogynistic man. He treated Ham terribly. Nothing Ham did was ever good enough. It was impossible to please, and it broke my heart watching Ham try to do so. He ignored Hamlet more often than not. Never showed him any affection. He ridiculed Hamlet's love of music and books with rancour, calling them wimpish and unmanly pursuits, and pushed him into hunting, wrestling and fencing. I can't believe he's gone. He's always been here, and now I'm never. Never going to see him again. When I think back to when I was little, I remember the king as this kind of looming presence, his face stone-like and foreboding. As a teenager, I began to get to know him as a person, began to take notice of how he spoke to Ham and Gertrude, void of any affection or kindness. It made me wonder. The older I became, the more uncomfortable I felt in his presence. Anytime I'd encounter him, he'd tell me I was becoming a fine young woman, just like Sophia, my mother. Ooh. I can see him now. His eyes fixed on my chest, and that leery smile fixed on his greasy face. He always looked like he'd just been eating joints of chicken. "What do you say, Ophelia?" Polonius would boom, and I'd have to mumble "thank you" with bile creeping up my throat. So, no. I'm not sad that the king is dead. And I know I will not miss having him as a father-in-law. Though I could never say that to Hamlet. Hamlet's always been a bit naive or innocent where his parents are concerned. He never went through that phase of realizing they're not perfect. Understandable, I suppose, considering they're the most important figures in the country. He's always particularly idolized his father, continuously choosing to either ignore his harshness or interpret it as fatherly instruction. I've never broached it with him. We don't really talk about our relationships with our parents to each other at all. They are what they are. At the end of the funeral service, Claudius, the king's brother, gave a eulogy denoting most of it to the king's victories in battle and giving but a few sentences to Ham and Gertrude. Claudius. Claudius is possibly the only person in the castle I have always found to be even more unnerving than the king. He's old Hamlet's younger by a good few years. How many, I don't know, but there's a good chance he's closer to Ham in age than he was to the king. I know he was too young to fight in the Great War, as King Hamlet would often chide him with that fact in public. While the king was leery, Claudius has always been more intense. He barely speaks to you when you meet him. Instead, he does this thing where he runs his eyes over you slowly. And when his stare eventually reaches your face, he gives you this knowing smirk, delighting in your obvious discomfort. I've always walked away from any meeting with him burning with embarrassment. The thing is, he's actually very attractive, but in a scary, intimidating kind of way. And he knows it. He's extremely popular with all the older women of the court. They all flock to him when he enters a room. The old maids call him a real cock of the walk. I've heard them tell stories of how he likes to seduce young female servants and then has them removed from the castle when he tires of them. It could be something they say to scare the younger girls, but it's not hard to imagine it being true. There was one maid a few years ago he seemed particularly fond of. Even I noticed it. And then suddenly he tried to dismiss her. But the king liked her too and called her back. And then, and it's probably a coincidence, but then she fell down the stairs and she couldn't work anymore. I heard some of the older maids saying that she was with child, but there's no way of knowing that was true. After the funeral, we came back to the castle, to the royal mausoleum, and then Laertes and I came back to our quarters, while Polonius stayed on, which was nice. Laertes is leaving tomorrow. He can't seem to get away quick enough. I wish he was staying longer. I feel better when he's here. It has been a week since the king's death, and as awful as it is to see Hamlet suffering, I'm so happy to have him home. There's not been one day we have not spent together since the funeral, something that could not have happened otherwise. Polonius and Claudius have taken control of the castle and are managing everything to give Gertrude and Hamlet time to grieve. It's probably a good thing, as Ham is really struggling, and it's looking more and more likely he'll have the entire kingdom depending on him very soon. I wish I could do more to help him deal with what he's going through, but most of the time I don't know what to say to him. He's completely fixated on the fact that he wasn't there when the king died. He keeps berating himself over it and agonizing over what it must have been like for the king to have died alone. Also, his adoration for old Hamlet seems to have swelled with his death. He talks about the king with such reverence. It's like a different person that has passed away than the King Hamlet I knew. I found myself listening to Hamlet's fond memories of his father and tales of his bravery, which Hamlet has heard second hand, desperately trying to think of something nice to contribute at the end of the story. But for the most part, I just nod and hold him, which is all I want to do anyway. But I feel the same way about Polonius. I wonder if he died today. Maybe if I didn't have Laertes as a brother, and did know that Polonius is capable of feeling pride and love for a son, just not a daughter who looks like her mother. I'm doing it again. Oh, woe is me. This isn't about me. For posterity, it has, I believe, been just over a week since my last recording, and Hamlet and I have yet to spend a whole day apart. Not only that, but most of the time we spend together, we are alone. We stay in his quarters or go for long walks in the woods, following the river, and take practically all of our meals together. I am getting ready now to meet him for supper. The shock of the king's death has definitely begun to loosen its grip on him. Practically everything still reminds him of the king, and he talks about him frequently, but the way he talks about him is less intense now. You can only stay that consumed by grief for so long. Thankfully, he seems to have stopped torturing himself over not being there when it happened. I know that he knows there's nothing he could have done to prevent it had he been there. For whatever reason, it was just the king's time. Sometimes his mind seems to allow him to briefly let go of his grief completely. Losing himself in a moment, he'll pick me up or laugh out loud. He has a ridiculous laugh, twice as loud as that of a normal person. In those moments, it feels I'm getting a glimpse of what our future holds, and it's hard not to feel extremely smug. We haven't talked about what happens next, but we both know what's coming. It has been a week since my last recording, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but Queen Gertrude is to marry Claudius. And Claudius is to be our new king. They announced their intended union yesterday during a meeting with the Parliament. Hamlet is beside himself. Yesterday I thought that Gertrude would pass the crown to Hamlet, and that this would be ratified by Parliament. I thought that we would be announcing our engagement after his coronation. But instead, Gertrude and Claudius announced their intent to marry, and the Parliament, approving this, voted in favour of Claudius becoming our new king. They plan to marry next week, and Claudius's coronation will take place 2 days later. It's all happening so quickly. Polonius had the tailors come days ago, and he ordered new formal wear for the entire family. I assumed it was in preparation for Hamlet's coronation, but maybe. Polonius has transitioned seamlessly from being Hamlet's right-hand man to being that of Claudius. It's mortifying. Hamlet hasn't said anything, but it can't have escaped him. Ham hasn't been fully himself since the king died, which is understandable. But this has opened up an anger in him that is just so unlike his usual self or character. It is as if Gertrude and Claudius's union has poured salt onto his grief, causing it to erupt into a bitter resentment towards them both. He believes they have desecrated his father's memory when he is barely even cold in the ground, and is furious with them because of it. Today he said that it would have been better for Gertrude to have died with his father than for her to be marrying Claudius as she is now. He doesn't mean it, not really, but he feels it. I really like Gertrude. She's always been very good to me, so I feel I should defend her, but I do not know how she can do this. To Hamlet. Marry her husband's brother, her son's uncle, barely a month after her husband's death. It's vile. And Claudius, of all people, there can't be any love between them. She's finally free. Why would she do this to herself? Ham keeps trying to figure out the timeline of their union. I mean, he assumes it was on Claudius's instigation, but you have to wonder how and when did he approach Gertrude? How soon was it after old Hamlet's death? And for how long have they kept their plan a secret? I'm so worried about Ham. For so much to have happened in such a short space of time, it's more than anyone could bear. When I say that Gertrude has always been very good to me, that doesn't even describe it. I started to spend a lot of time with Gertrude after I turned 10. That's when I was told that good girls don't play with boys, but there weren't any girls in the castle for me to play with. Gertrude would take me for long walks through the forest and by the river and tell me stories about my mother. I would think about them all the way back to the castle, repeating them in my mind over and over so I didn't forget, and then write them down word for word when I got home. Time And again, I have been told of how pretty Sophia was, but Gertrude told me stories about her and who she was and things she did before she was even married. The very first thing that Gertrude told me about Sophia was that she loved flowers. Gertrude said that she could recognise and name all the plants and flowers that grew in Elsinore and explain the folklore and beliefs surrounding each one, like whether they were thought to have medicinal or even magical properties. Gertrude said that she and Sophia used to put ivy under their pillows before they were married so as to dream of their future loves. Poring over books about flowers and walking through the woods picking bouquets with Gertrude made me feel close to my mother. I used to bore Laertes half to death, telling him all about the symbolism of flowers. It's where I got the idea for Ham to use it as a way to pass messages to each other, though I've never told him that. I haven't spent time like that with Gertrude since I started seeing Ham. I felt so guilty keeping a secret from her that I distanced myself from her, but I would have thought I still knew her. I cannot fathom why the fuck she's doing this. Would she be doing it if she knew we were together? Tomorrow is the royal wedding. Gertrude and Claudius will become husband and wife, and 2 days later, Claudius will be crowned King of Denmark. My heart weeps. The last week has been a living nightmare. Poor Ham is a mess. His disillusionment and resentment against Gertrude and Claudius has festered and grown since their announcement to Parliament. Their union cuts him as a deep betrayal of him and his father. Every day since their announcement, he has raged against Claudius, who, he says, has stolen his father's life while he can barely even bring himself to say his mother's name, let alone see her. He has too much respect for his position and country to say anything publicly, so thankfully I alone have heard his misgivings. I'm not sure what to expect tomorrow. I think it will be even harder for Ham than the funeral, especially as it's being held in the same cathedral. The only solace is that in 24 hours it'll be over, and in 72 hours the whole sorry affair will be done. I keep thinking how quickly everything is happening, how quickly it was all arranged. Laertes arrived home yesterday evening, and we stayed up till late talking. It's killing me that I cannot talk to him properly about Ham. He has not said how long he'll be staying, but I hope it will be longer than last time. When I asked his opinion of the couple-to-be, his only comment was that Gertrude was a prudent woman and a good mother. How he thinks marrying Ham's uncle is good mothering, I don't understand. But I couldn't discuss it with him any further, as I knew I would get too upset and probably say something I shouldn't. That's it. It has happened. Long live King Claudius. It is officially a new era. After the wedding, any residual tension that had hung in the air since old Hamlet's death dissipated. Today, the castle is as boisterous and merry as it has ever been, and I can tell it is killing poor Ham. The coronation itself was long and formal. It was again held in the cathedral, a location we can't seem to get away from. When we returned to the castle afterwards, Claudius gave an address to the court, his first formal act as king, during which he made it clear that the past was to be put firmly out of mind. He told Hamlet in front of the entire court that the time for grieving the old king had come to an end, and that for him to continue to mourn would be self-indulgent foolishness. I could see every muscle tighten in Ham's face as he spoke. Ham had worn a black sash during the service, the same as during the wedding. It definitely irritated Claudius, and I presume was the reason why he included Ham in his speech. That was the only blip during the day, and I'd imagine no one except for Gertrude even noticed the friction between them. At that point, everyone else seemed content to slip into the new normal, and were already merry from drink. I met Ham in the garden after the address. I expected him to be seething, but he was oddly circumspect and quiet. Maybe now that it's actually happened, and Claudius has been crowned, Ham can start to accept it and adapt. We had spoken about it and agreed it would be best for him to return to Wittenberg tomorrow, but today Gertrude asked him to stay in Elsinore for longer. I know it would be best for his own sake, for him to get some space away from the court, but the selfish side of me is happy that he is staying. I won't be able to see Ham tonight, as he is meeting Horatio, presumably to avoid the coronation festivities. Under no other circumstances would there ever be a celebration so soon after a king's death. It's as vulgar as Claudius's character. I probably wouldn't be able to see Ham tonight anyway, as King Claudius has given Laertes leave to return to Paris, and he is leaving this very evening. King Claudius. My heart weeps for what could have been. Fucking men! I know there is one rule for men and another for women. I know it is an unbalanced society, so why does it upset me so much every time it is evidenced? Before he left, Laertes let me know that he knew about me and Hamlet. Laertes has had at least one girl on the go since he was 16, but I'm to fear intimacy. Fear and avoid it. Some nerve. Hamlet's will is not his own, he said, and so his love and promises carry no weight. Even more than that, him staying with me may not be his will at all. As though Ham may think he loves me, it is possible it is really just lust. Lust that will disappear once satisfied. Laertes knows Ham. He's known Ham for years. How could he think Ham could be so governed by his dick that he'd imagine he loved me? Like he's under some hypnotic spell, only to come to his senses once I let him into my knickers. Or as Laertes said, once I open my chaste treasure to him, like I've a golden badge. Obviously, I didn't tell Laertes the truth, that we've been sleeping together for a year, which granted doesn't amount to much as he's been away the majority of that time. I'm just so angry. It's all right for him, especially now he's hundreds of miles away in Paris. He's no idea what life is like for me, no fucking idea. For so long, I did fear intimacy and sex and boys in general. The idea... That summer, when Hamlet came home, I felt uncomfortable being around him. I was so self-conscious, ashamed, and embarrassed. It took months for me to believe that he liked me the way that I liked him. And then, when we started falling for each other properly, I spent most of my time waiting around for him to change his mind and realise I wasn't good enough. I wanted him, but I was afraid to sleep with him in case it changed me somehow, made me less bad, ruined me. And at the same time, I was afraid not to sleep with him, in case he stopped liking me. I don't know when that stopped. I think I reached a point where I was so sick of being afraid that my brain just had to let it go before I imploded. Is that right? Did I consciously let it go? No. The feelings more kind of slowly dissipated. I gradually let it go. The more time we spent together, the more comfortable I got, until I realized I wasn't scared anymore. And today, all those old feelings came rushing back when Laertes and fucking Polonius! The second that Laertes had left, Polonius ambushed me with a lecture of his own. At least Laertes' warnings came from a place of worry for me, not for how my ruin would debase him and his standing. Thankfully, Polonius didn't know as much as Laertes. He said he heard I had been giving the prince much of my time of late. Ha! If he only knew. I wouldn't have told Polonius anything, except that then he asked me straight out, "What is between you?" And suddenly I found myself telling him the weakest version of the truth. I said the prince had made tenders of his affections towards me. He called me a green girl, a baby, unaware of the perilous circumstances I have put myself in. He said the prince's words were nothing but brokers with which to beguile me into unholy pursuits. What is between you? A tiny bit of spittle landed on my arm and my heart stopped when he said it. I don't know what possessed me. What did I think I was doing? Did I think he would welcome the news? Hug me with pride? Maybe he would have, had he thought it were possible and not utterly fanciful. It should have been something he longed to hear. My marriage to Hamlet will secure his position forever. Am I so unlovable? So unlovable that it is inconceivable that Hamlet could actually love me and not just wish to wreck me. And his prime concern wasn't even for me. It was for the weak position within which he would be left when Hamlet inevitably disregards me. Me, the gullible fool asking to be defiled. It's my own fault. We overplayed our hand when the king died, and I let it happen. Ham's right. Our relationship should remain a secret until we're ready to control how it is received. I should never have let us raise Polonius to suspicion. The last thing he said to me before he left was that I had to come my ways. Felt more like a warning or a threat than an order. What is between you? A whole fucking kingdom! That's what's between us! I can't sleep. My brain is driving me crazy. I keep replaying my encounter with Polonius in my head, and the more I do, the more unnerved I feel. No. Not unnerved. Scared. I feel scared. What would happen if he found out the true nature of our relationship, but did not believe Hamlet's sincerity? Worse still, what if Hamlet did abandon me? I know he won't, obviously, but when I was young, I was told that bad girls were sent to live with nuns. It was a constant threat and one that worked as it didn't feel entirely empty. Later I learned that in the not-so-distant past, young women were consigned to convents or nunneries owing to their sinful or wanton behaviour. They may not even have engaged in such behaviour, they just had to be deemed high risk of doing so, and they were packed off to a nunnery, kept out of sight until their marriage was arranged. Or if a match could not be made, they were just left there, forgotten. I used to hear terrible stories about the nuns' cruelty, which always confused me, as any I have ever met here in Elsinore have always been kind and gentle old women. I used to have this reoccurring nightmare that men would come into my room to take me away for being bad. I'd never know what I'd done specifically, just that I'd done something wrong. I'd fight and scream my lungs out as they silently dragged me away for good. It's all my fault. I should have known better than to spend so much time with Ham around the castle. Polonius isn't going to send me away. The Urties wouldn't allow it. And Ham would never let it reach that point. I know he wouldn't. Never. Never, 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 never. For posterity, today is the first of King Claudius's reign, and my prohibition from seeing Prince Hamlet. I met Horatio in the garden this afternoon. I felt I needed to let Ham know what had happened, so I wrote a short message bordered with ivy. I sat reading in a place I knew Horatio was sure to pass by, and dropped the note when he neared. "You dropped this, my lady," he said, picking up the note and seamlessly handing me back an entirely different piece of paper. Our usual routine. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting a note back from Hamlet. I thought maybe he had heard what had happened, and I had hoped to speak to Horatio, but he kept his eyes down and strode away the second I had taken the note from his hand. Not his usual demeanour. I couldn't open the note till I got home, and I haven't been able to stop smiling since I did. To the Celestial and my soul's idol, the most beautified Ophelia. Beautified because he says I wear too much makeup. I'll start again. To the Celestial and my soul's idol, the most beautified Ophelia. In her excellent white bosom, these words should stay stored and remain undisclosed. Doubt that the stars are fire, doubt that the sun doth move, doubt truth to be a liar, but never doubt I love. O dear Ophelia, I am ill at these numbers. I have not art to reckon my groans, but that I love thee best. O most best believe it. Adieu. Thine evermore, most dear lady, whilst this machine is to him. Hamlet. He has sent me many poems before, but never one of his own invention. He must have heard from some other source that Polonius has banned me from seeing him. Doubt though the stars are fire, doubt that the sun doth move, but never doubt I love. It's as if he knew exactly what I needed to hear. I love you too. Good night, my sweet prince. For posterity, today is day 6 of good King Claudius's reign. Given the amount of time Ham and I have spent apart this year, not seeing him is weighing more heavily on me than I expected. Knowing he is in the castle and not being able to see him is torture. After all the time we spent together, I feel like I'm in withdrawal. It seems like Ham is finding our separation just as difficult as I am. I've heard mumblings from the servants that he's been acting oddly. One minute he's shouting irritably, and the next he's wandering the castle aimlessly in a deep state of melancholy, as if in a trance. Maybe he's rethinking things. A large bronze statue of old King Hamlet appeared in the main courtyard this week. It is unusual to honour a king in such a way just 6 weeks after his death. If I were being cynical, I would say that its function is to put the old king's reign firmly in the past. But maybe that's just me being unkind. Though, when did Claudius even have it commissioned? The day after old Hamlet's death? I do not know how Hamlet will be feeling about it. I wish I could talk to him. I casually inquired after him yesterday, and Osric told me he has been spending most of his time with Horatio. I'm not sure who I'm more jealous of. Hamlet, because he has Horatio to confide in, or Horatio because he gets to see and talk to Hamlet. For posterity, it is day 16 of King Claudius's reign, which means it has been 2 weeks since I've had any contact with Hamlet. Even when he's in Wittenberg, 2 weeks would not pass without him sending me a letter or a poem or something. I know we can't see each other, and maybe he thinks written messages could be risky, but he could pass flowers to me via Horatio, or easier still, leave them outside my window. Something's wrong, I can feel it. Several times now I have sat in the garden waiting for Horatio to pass by so that I might inquire after Hamlet, but he has not shown. Then today I saw him from afar, and I swear, on seeing me, he turned and went back the way he had come to avoid me. Also, there have been increased rumours among the courtiers that Hamlet's strange behaviour has begun to escalate. They're saying he's becoming more and more erratic. And I overheard Polonius saying that he himself had heard the prince babbling and talking nonsense alone in the halls. They're saying it's a delayed nervous reaction to him losing his father and Claudius's unforeseen ascension to the throne. I know everything that has happened has taken a great toll on him, but he was more angry than overcome about the kingship and Claudius and Gertrude, and only in private. All the talk has made me re-examine the last exchanges I had with him and the letter that he gave me. The more I reread it, the more I think there is a deeper meaning to it than I first thought. It's not like any of his other letters. For a start, he doesn't usually use hyperbole or write his own poems. Doubt that the stars are fire. Doubt that the sun doth move. Doubt truth to be a liar, but never doubt I love. Is he literally saying to doubt the things I know? To doubt that which we have been told to be true? Except we don't really know whether the sun moves around the earth or vice versa. So is he saying to doubt everything? Both what I know and what is unproven. dear Ophelia, I am ill at these numbers. I have not art to reckon my groans, but that I love thee best. Most best believe it, adieu. I thought he was saying that he had not art to write any more verse. But could this actually mean that he has something to say, but he doesn't know how to say it? That something is troubling him? That there is something he wants to tell me, but he doesn't know how? And I should trust nothing except his love for me. Then there's the end. Thine evermore most dear lady, whilst this machine is to him. Hamlet. Whilst this machine is to him. He sends me this, and days later the castle is rife with gossip that he's lost his wits. That's too much of a coincidence. And the word machine seems out of place. A machine is something you control or use to complete a task. He must be saying he cannot tell me something, but he is in control of what he is doing, and I should doubt everything except his love for me. It's either that or he's trying to break up with me. Mark. His greatness weighed, his will is not his own. I need to find out what's going on. For posterity, it has been 3 hours since my last recording. I managed to gain some information from Sarah, one of the royal chambermaids, in exchange for 2 gold bracelets. She told me she has witnessed Ham's erratic behaviour with her own eyes, and that the king and queen have become so alarmed by it they have met with Horatio several times to see if he knows the root of Ham's sudden change of behaviour. Horatio was, she said, meeting with the king and queen as we spoke. And today, she said, they sent for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's return to Elsinore in hopes that they will be able to ascertain what's wrong with the prince. They're expected to arrive within the next 3 days, unfortunately. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Ham's 2 dickhead friends from when we were young. Ham loves them like brothers, but the truth of the matter is they're nothing more than a pair of obnoxious, self-serving users. Ham cherishes them as his oldest friends. Just because you've had somebody in your life for a long time doesn't mean they're a good friend. Just means that you've had them in your life for a long time. They don't care about Ham. They didn't even come back for his father's funeral, for fuck's sake. It was none of my concern when we weren't together, and when we did get together, I didn't want to be the kind of girlfriend who tries to drive a wedge between her boyfriend and his friends, but fuck me, they're pretentious pricks. Whatever's going on with Ham, you can be sure they'll try to find a way of capitalising on the situation. Anyway, after I spoke to Sarah, I waited outside the throne room to speak with Horatio. I tried asking him what was going on with Ham, but he just mumbled that he had not seen him and that I should not worry. He's Ham's best friend. If something were wrong, he would be worried. But at the same time, if there wasn't anything to worry about, he wouldn't be avoiding me and acting so strangely. I decided not to press the matter and instead pressed a leaf of chickweed into his hand to give to Ham. All I can do now is wait. Well, Horatio gave Hamlet my message. I was awoken by a loud knocking on the door, and when I opened it, he was there. He was in a state. His clothes were wet and he was shivering. He said that he had been running, tried to clear his head. I could see it was pouring rain outside. For a long time, that's all he said. He just sat on the bed, staring at the floor in silence, his big eyes full of anguish. Then he started talking at speed, words flooding out of his mouth as he got everything off his chest. Unbelievable things. It's hard to know where to start. He said that the ghost of the old king had come to him. Not in a dream, but face to face he appeared before himself and Horatio the night of the coronation. The ghost told Ham that he had been betrayed by his brother. Claudius, the ghost said, had murdered him in cold blood before seducing Gertrude into marriage, all so that he himself could be king. The ghost then charged Ham with the task of avenging his foul murder and saving Elsinore from Claudius. Only he, the ghost said, could save Elsinore from Claudius. Ham admitted his story sounded crazy, but swore it was the truth. He is sure that what he saw is really a ghost, and not some sort of malicious stunt. I know charlatans can pretend to channel spirits to take advantage of the grieving, so I asked him if he can really be sure that it was the king, and not some enemy of Elsinore trying to divide the kingdom. An agent of Fortinbras, maybe? But he swears it impossible. His father, he said, came so close. He could have touched him. No trick of the light could create what he had seen. And he wasn't the only one who saw him. Horatio and the soldier Marcellus were with him and saw the same, though Ham has sworn them both to secrecy. Even if Ham was wrought with grief and anger after the coronation, Marcellus and Horatio would have had no reason not to have had their full wits about them. If all three of them are convinced of what they saw, who am I to say they were wrong? I, who have always believed there is more to this world beyond what we can see. I, who often talk to my mother when I am alone. Presuming it was indeed a ghost, I said, just because this apparition appeared as the old king does not mean for certain it was him and not some evil demon in his form. Or if it was really the king, then maybe he was confused in death. Ham said he had thought of this and had read of such demonic interventions. Though it certainly sounds like old Hamlet. Rather than telling his only son that he loves and misses him, he charges him with avenging a crime he has no proof even occurred. Utterly selfish and destructive. When I asked Ham where his reported strange behaviour fitted in with his story, he explained that for the past 2 weeks he has been feigning madness, using it as a disguise so that he can investigate the king's death without his uncle or his allies doubting his loyalty or suspecting that he knows the truth. His searching of the castle and erratic questioning of the courtiers has, however, so far been unsuccessful, with his ruse, he said, failing to bring him any closer to being sure if any of what the ghost claimed is true. He admitted the whole affair has made him paranoid. Horatio and Marcellus, he feels, are the only ones he can trust, as the ghost chose to appear in front of them too. Every other member of the court is a potential co-conspirator. Gertrude and Polonius hung in the air unspoken. As Ham spoke, I could hear the desperation in his voice and see the exhaustion in his eyes. He's completely on edge. Now he has drawn so much attention to himself, he is not sure what he will do next, but I begged him not to do anything reckless. He knows to challenge Claudius would be akin to treason, so he has promised not to confront his uncle until he is certain of his guilt. I've never liked Claudius, but I would not have thought him capable of murder, especially that of his own brother. Then again, I didn't think he would usurp the crown. Before he left, I told Ham of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's imminent arrival. He seemed heartened by the news, but I asked him not to be too quick to confide in them. They are, I stressed, coming on the behest of Claudius and Gertrude. He seemed to take notice of what I was saying. I hope for his sake he did. He then, in turn, made me promise to leave Elsinore, if and when the situation escalates. I can't bear the thought of leaving him here alone, especially in the state that he is in. But I agreed. My plan is to write to Laertes and ask him to return home. The difficulty will be asking him to return without giving him a reason why. I just wish Ham had come to me sooner. Adieu, friends.
Fuck! I think I might have fucked up. When I awoke this morning, I heard talking outside my door. A coldness swept through me as I heard one servant swear to another they had seen Hamlet leaving my chamber in the middle of the night. I listened at the door carefully, and thankfully they do not seem to have heard any of our conversation. Talking is not what they assumed we were doing. My mind raced. What would Polonius do when he found out? Ham specifically said last night that it was now more important than ever that our relationship remain secret, as were Claudius or anyone to become suspicious of his actions, our relationship would potentially put me in grave danger. I got dressed as quickly as I could and made my way to Polonius's office. My only hope, I thought, was to tell him of Ham's visit myself. I waited for Ronaldo to leave and then burst in anxiously. The prince, I said, had come to my room uninvited. Looking dishevelled, he stayed for less than a minute and then left, all without saying a word. I cannot be sure if he had already been told of Ham's visit, but Polonius seemed to believe my version of events, and I had hoped it would be chalked up to another instance of Ham's recent odd behaviour. But somehow, inexplicably, after not having believed that Hamlet could hold genuine affection for me just 2 weeks ago, Polonius now thinks that this, along with the rest of Ham's erratic behaviour of late, is obviously the manifestation of the prince's forlorn lovesickness for me. Diagnosis he is set on telling the king and queen. I feel sick. I need to get some fresh air and get this letter to Laertes. The sooner he can get home, the better. For posterity, it has been 3, maybe 4 hours since my last recording. My walk didn't improve my mood. If anything, it has worsened. Unable to locate Horatio, I gave my letter for Laertes to Osric, who has promised to get it on the next ship bound for Paris. Osric joyously informed me that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have arrived, as have the travelling players. Apparently, Ham has already got the players to act out scenes for him and his returned friends in the hall, and has engaged the troupe to perform in some sort of performance for the court tomorrow night. It may be a product of him lessening his mad routine, but it is still bizarre, given the situation. The travelling players have always made me think of running away. Running away with them has been a fantasy of mine since I was a small child. I wish Ham and I could just run away together now. Just the two of us on a boat, sailing away and never looking back. I packed a bag once, determined to leave Elsinore. Don't know how old I was, 8, 10 maybe. I packed a bag and was ready to go, but When I tried to leave, my door wouldn't open. Ronaldo had locked it from the outside. I presume it was Ronaldo. I stared out the window as the players packed up their caravan and went, waving their scarves out of their windows as they left. While I pounded on my window with my fists, screaming and crying long after they had left. I knew I'd miss my chance. I haven't thought about that in a long time. They locked her in a tower long, long ago. That's funny, I thought. Where is my... Motherfucker, it's gone. Hamlet's last letter, and I'd say a dozen others at least. Fuck it! For posterity, today is day 18 of Good King Claudius's reign. I found out, on being summoned to Polonius's office early this morning, that he and the king are to orchestrate a meeting between myself and Hamlet, so that they may observe us together and determine whether I am indeed the cause of his perceived mental decline. Ham must really have made an impression around the castle if Gertrude has agreed to their spying on him. Polonius gave me back my letters, which was something. No apology, of course. He just pushed them across his desk towards me before I left. Their genius plan is for me to wait in the south corridor until Ham happens upon me, so that Claudius and Polonius can then spy on us from the mezzanine. Classic Polonius. Ham is going to be incensed when he realizes what is happening. I feel sick. I've already thrown up twice this morning. I'm coming! I'm not sure where to start. A lot has happened since this morning, and it is barely 6 p.m. I went along with Claudius and Polonius's plan to stage an accidental encounter between myself and Hamlet. It was the first time I had seen Claudius since Ham told me of his crimes. Alleged crimes. I'm not sure if there is a way to ever find out for sure what's real and what's fiction. I'm not convinced we can take the word of old Hamlet, but after today, the idea that the ghost was telling the truth does seem more plausible to me. Claudius exuded an aggressive intensity that unnerved me. It is clear he is extremely agitated, but it doesn't feel as if it's being driven by worry for Hamlet. Gertrude, on the other hand, did appear someone racked with worry. Her face was pale, her brow furrowed, and she is thinner than she was just a few weeks ago. When she saw me, she grasped my hand tightly and said that she hoped I was the cause of the change in her Hamlet. My heart broke for her. I wanted to tell her that he was all right, that he wasn't in distress, well, not in the way that she imagined. But instead, I agreed with her, and my stomach nodded with guilt. I sat in the hallway for 40 minutes, waiting. I could hear Claudius and Polonius whispering conspiratorially the whole time, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. Eventually, Ham happened upon me. For a split second, he looked happy to see me, but it was quickly replaced with confusion and worry. I had the bunch of his letters that had been taken from my room in my hands, on top of which I had placed a picture of a rhododendron for caution and danger. Looking down at them, he understood immediately that we were not alone, and I saw a flash of anger flash across his eyes. We spoke for maybe 10 minutes, but I think it was the worst 10 minutes of my life. I knew what he was doing, and I knew why he was doing it, but it was brutal. First, he set about disowning me. I know, for my own protection. Then he made it clear to me that he wanted me to leave Elsinore. Claudius and Polonius's using of me to spy on him must really have scared him, because he did both in the cruelest, coldest way imaginable, leaving no doubt of his animosity for me. I know it was an act, one that said if someone wanted to hurt him, hurting me was not the way to do it. But he spoke to me in a way he never has before. It really shook me. He spoke so nastily to me. It took all of my energy not to cry while he ridiculed my want for a family and shouted at me to leave Elsinore for a nunnery. I'm sure I've told him that being sent away is a fear of mine. I'm sure I told him about the nightmares I had as a child. I think I did. But still, he kept saying it, shouting it, snarling it over and over. I've never felt more alone. When he did leave, I started crying. I told myself it was for Claudius and Polonius's benefit, but even if that were true, it had no effect. The second they came down from the mezzanine, they dismissed me. They couldn't have cared less about me. I could hear them talking as I walked away. Claudius doesn't believe I am the cause of Hamlet's madness, or that he holds any affection for me at all, while Polonius still thinks that love for me is at the root of his behaviour. He is chomping at the bit now for me to be future queen. What next? Oh, yes, I had barely returned from that visit to hell when Rosencrantz and Guildenstern came battering at my door, asking for information about Hamlet and today's meeting, acting like we were best friends and they hadn't been pricks to me my entire life. They dropped the act when they realised I wasn't going to tell them anything. She probably made it all up for attention, Rosencrantz said, looking at me with his beady pig eyes. I bet she doesn't even know anything. Yeah, I'd say she wrote all the letters herself, Guildenstern said. Hamlet would never be interested in that. I screamed at them to get out, which thankfully they did, delighting at my overreaction and probably taking it as confirmation that I had indeed fabricated Hamlet's affection. Hamlet's probably right and I should leave. What I want to do is get drunk and go to bed. But I can't do that. And it will be noticed if I do not attend this evening's performance. If I do leave, it will have to be late in the night. Doubt that the stars are fire. Doubt that the sun doth move. Doubt truth to be a liar. But never doubt I love. He loves me best. 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 I just have this overpowering feeling that something terrible is going to happen and there's nothing I can do to stop it. I'm coming!